Hey everyone, this is Jamie Dawson Codes, and in this video I have a question for you. Are you a developer who would like to use AI to help you pass your technical interviews? Or maybe you're a developer looking to understand how to work with large language models and use tools for them? Well, in this video we're going to use Together AI with a tool management platform for LLMs called Toolhouse. With Toolhouse, you can easily do what is known as function calling with their built-in tools across multiple LLMs, but in this video, I'm just going to be focusing on Together AI. So, to show you how this will work, I'll go ahead and just run the app for you that I have running up here. So, in the app, we have an area where you put in your prompt. You have a button where you click to send the prompt to Toolhouse. It will take a couple seconds to load, and then once Toolhouse is done, it will generate the response and show it here. So here in the prompt, I'm putting in generate FizzBuzz code executed to show me the results up to 10. So FizzBuzz is a very classic interview question you can expect if you're trying to pass a technical interview, so I figured this one would be a really great place to start. And just like that, we now have our code that we can now use to learn how to pass FizzBuzz. Now, in the console log, you're going to see two things. One, this console log that says tool call got called, and the data itself. So if you go into the data, hit data, and then you'll see tool call code. What that basically means is that Toolhouse determined with the prompt that we gave it that it should be utilizing a tool that we installed into our platform itself. The one it's specifically called actually is called Code Interpreter. So here on the actual Toolhouse site itself, you'll see there's like multiple tools you can apply to your account that you can start utilizing into your code. And just by clicking this button, it becomes automatically available in my Toolhouse code. But that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes like the response will actually be in a different part of the response body, and I want to show you an example of that. So here, I'm going to write, give me a description of how FizzBuzz works, and then show me some code. So here it actually updated. We have the code, but it also provides a string explaining how the actual code works. And you'll see in the data, instead of it being tool call code, it actually would be just regular response with a value of content. So as we're building this app, we need to make sure that we're factoring in for both situations where we're either calling a tool inside of Toolhouse or just having like a general response like with the LLM, because there might be a situation where if we're only calling one or the other, we will actually should be getting a response, and it is stored in a response body, but it won't actually display on our app. So something to consider as we're building the app. So now that you know how the app actually works, let's go ahead and actually jump in and start building some code. So before we jump into code, we need to make sure that we're actually set up to be able to use the platform itself inside of our code. So what I would recommend doing is creating an account with Toolhouse. You can do that by going to the quick start page. I will actually provide this link in the description below. This is a great page to basically keep for reference moving forward, because we're going to be using it to reference different things as we build out our code. So when you go there, create an account. Once you're done creating an account, all you have to do is click this button right here to the API keys. It will redirect you to the API key page, where all you have to do is give it a name and click the generate button, and it will generate the API key that we'll be using inside of our app. Secondly, you're also going to go ahead and have to make an account on Together AI. Thankfully, their free tier is pretty generous, and if you don't have the actual an API key to begin with, all you have to do is go to Dashboard, go to View Keys, and it will either be the main key that's provided, or you can generate another key inside of here. Once you're done setting up your APIs, now it's time for you to install the tools that you're going to need inside of your Toolhouse account. So go to app.toolhouse.ai and go to the tool store. And then from here, you can find tools like Code Interpreter and Web Search, and go ahead and click what should be the install button for you, and go ahead and make sure that they're installed. All right, so let's go ahead and build out our folder structure. So here on my desktop, I'm just going to make a project called Toolhouse Project. I'm going to open up the folder. Now I want to make two folders. One, I'm going to make a folder called Backend. This is where our Toolhouse code will live. And inside of here, I want to make a terminal. Now I want to make a React app, so I'm just going to do npx create React app, and I'm just going to call it Frontend. So that's going to take a couple seconds to load. While that's loading, we can go ahead and jump into our backend. So in your backend, I want you to make two files. First file, make an app.py file. Secondly, make a .env file. So we'll need to make two variables. We'll call the first one Toolhouse API key, and the second one will be Together API key. So here, you're going to take the two API keys you created for Toolhouse and Together, and you're just going to copy and paste them here and save this file. So now that we're inside our app.py file, I want to go ahead and actually write out some comments for the steps we need to follow in order to actually write all of our backend code. So the first thing we're going to need to do is need to import all of our dependencies. Secondly, we need to initialize the Flask app. Next, we'll need to load environment variables. Next, we need to get the Together API variable. From there, we need to initialize the Together client using the API key. After that, we got to go ahead and initialize the Toolhouse client. Next, we got to create the app. Next, we got to create the app route. From there, we need to get the content. After getting the content, we need to modify the message object with the content received from the front end. After that, we'll go ahead and get the initial response from Together. From there, we just got to check to see if tool call is in the response. Now, if it's not in the response, we go ahead and do a check for that and return that. Else, we just go ahead and return an error. Lastly, we need to be able to check to see if we were able to get a response from Together API at all. If not, we need to have an error. So we'll just do error for not finding Together API response. And then lastly, we just need to write a little bit of Flask code to make sure that the code only gets called when it's being requested. And then we also need to set the debug mode to true. Okay, so let's start by importing all of our dependencies. First thing I need to do is I need to make sure I'm actually inside my backend folder. And I'm going to run this command. So I'm doing pip install flask course, python, .environment, toolhouse, and together. While that's installing, I'll go ahead and explain what everything does. So Flask is used as a framework for building out your server. A Flask course is used for cross-origin resource sharing, since we're going to be calling this in a React app. Python.environment will be used to load the environment variables from the .env file. Toolhouse is what we use to actually work with Toolhouse, and Together is what we use for the Together API. So I'll go ahead and add our dependencies. So we'll do from Flask, import Flask, request, and JSONify. Oh, by the way, if you're curious how my code is auto-loading, I'm using a platform called Codium. Strongly recommend it for auto-filling code. All right. So next we'll do from Flask course, import course. We'll do import OS. We'll do from Toolhouse, import Toolhouse. Next we'll do from .env, import load.env. So we got that. And lastly, from Together, import Together. So now that we got our dependencies imported, let's go ahead and start building out our app. To start off, let's do app equals Flask_name. Now I need to add cores, and we'll set it to app. I want to make sure I can load the environment variable, so I'll use load_.env. So next, I want to be able to get the Together API key from the .env file. So I'll go ahead and make a variable called Together API key, and I will go ahead and extract the API key from it. Next, I want to be able to initialize the Together client using the API key. So we'll go ahead and call it client Together API key. This needs to be written out a little bit differently. So it needs to be API_key equals Together_API key. So next, I want to be able to set up the model. So ignore this one. This is actually incorrect. It's actually one of the reasons I told you I want you to keep the quick start document up. So we can just copy this, go back into our code, and then paste it. And this is the model that we'll be using. So from here, I want to be able to initialize the Toolhouse client. So I'm going to go ahead and call it th, and I'm going to use the Toolhouse functionality, and I'm going to get the API key from it. Now we need to set the route. So we'll go ahead and do app.route, but instead of calling it together, I'm going to call it generate code. And make sure you set your methods to post. I want to generate the function, so we'll do def generate code. I want to get the data, so we'll do data request.get.json. Next, we'll do user content, and I'll do data.get. From here, I want to go ahead and be sure to get from the content key. So content. So basically, when I send this route an object, it's going to look for the key of content, and then it's going to grab it, and then we'll be able to start using that information or whatever is stored into it. Next, I want to modify the messages object with the content received from the front end. So to do that, let's just do messages. We'll make that an array of objects. And from here, I want to set the role to user, and I want the content to be set to whatever I was able to pull from the user content variable. Real quick, before we move forward, I'm noticing we're receiving an error here on request. Go ahead and scroll all the way up. So I accidentally wrote this incorrectly. So be sure from Flask, import Flask. Don't forget that. And that should get rid of the error we're seeing in request. So inside of here, I want to go ahead and try to initialize the response from together. So to do that, first we'll just go ahead and make a try. Next, I want to go ahead and create a variable called response. And what that's going to do is that's going to be equal to client.chat.completions.create. And so inside of here, I want to set model to model. I want to set messages to messages. And then lastly, I want to set tools to th.getTools. And so to kind of give you a quick explanation what that's going to do, so this model here, this is set to this model variable up here. You have messages, which is set to this messages variable. And then lastly, we have tools, and this right here is using Toolhouse to basically utilize all the tools that we have saved into our account, such as those tools that you downloaded on your profile. So now I need to check to see if tool call is actually found in the response. If it is, then that's the thing I need to return. So here I'll just do if response.choices and response.choices at the 0th place with .messages .tool calls. So basically, if response choices is found, and it's also found in there as well, then we need to actually get it. So we'll call it tool call equals response.choices at the 0th place, messages tool calls at the 0th place. Now I need to go ahead and actually extract the code from the tool call argument. To do that, I'm going to make a variable called function arguments, equal it to tool call dot function dot arguments, and then I'll just return it and JSONify it. Do that. Make a string tool underscore call underscore code, and we will set it to function arguments. As a matter of fact, you might remember this from the console log that I showed you at the beginning of the video. So next, after checking to see if tool calls has any value in it, if it doesn't, then we need to check the next value, which should be content. So here we'll do else if response.choices and response.choices at the 0 spot dot messages, or sorry, dot message dot content. From there, I need to get the data, so I'll just call this content equal to response.choices at the 0 spot dot message dot content. And then all I have to do is return JSONify it, and I'll call this response, and I'll set it to content. Else, pretty much like there was just nothing to find, wasn't able to generate, so I'll just go ahead and return a JSONify error message, set it to, actually I'll just go ahead and set it to 400, and I want the message to be a bit more clear, so I'll set it to no content or tool call found in the response. And because this is a try statement, we need to go ahead and put an except. So add except, exception as E. Now I want to make a return statement. We will return it as an object for 500. I'll make an error. And I want that string to say failed to generate response from Together API. And the last thing I want to do is I just want to make sure that this function runs when it is specifically called on. So I got to write a little bit of Flask code at the end here. So do Flask underscore name equals to main. And now I want to run, I want the app to run in debug mode. To start testing our code, let's go ahead and turn on our Flask app. So to do that, just do py and then the name of the app.py file. It'll take a second to run, and it'll tell you that it is running on port 5000. So a tool that I like to use to test out like my backend code is a platform called Postman. Strongly recommend using it if you're not using it. It's a free platform. You can go ahead and like make an account. It just takes you a couple of seconds. And then from here, what you do is like once you create an account and you're signed in, you need to go ahead and create a workspace to have all of your API calls that you can work with. So here I have a workspace called My Workspace. And then what you want to do is you'll want to go ahead and create a collection for your Toolhouse API calls. So up here, you'll click on Create New Collection, and then you create Blank Collection. And that will allow you to create a blank collection, and then you can rename it to something like Toolhouse Backend Calls. Then from here, you would just go ahead and you click a button called Add Request, or you can just go ahead and click this button up here, and that will generate it as well. Once you have these options pulled up, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go ahead and click this drop down. It'll initially be set to get, so you'll want to go ahead and change it to post. And then inside of here, you'll want to go ahead and have the call be for the localhost 5000/generate code, because that is the function path that we created for this functionality. Then at the bottom here, you want to click on body, then click raw. And then you want to make sure that it's set to JSON in this drop-down menu right here. Once you're done with that, you will create an object with the role as the user, and then content as generate fizzbuzz code, execute it so it shows me the results up to 10. So once all of that is set up, all you have to do is click send. As per like the last time, it'll take a couple seconds to process the request. And if we did everything right, we should see a response with the code that it generated. And now you see that all of our backend code works. You'll see that we got an object with tool call code, and it has all of the data that we need in order to put into our front-end application. So for this last section of the video, I decided that I wanted this video to be more focused on Toolhouse functionality as opposed to making this a React tutorial. So what I've gone and done is I've went and taken the code for the front end and copy and pasted it into the source app.js file. I will be providing this code in the link in the description. Regardless though, I'm going to give a quick description of how to get this up and running. So all you have to do inside of your front end folder, and make sure you cd into that, is that you need to run npm i axios to use the Axios package, which allows you to make backend calls in your React app. Now on the front end, we have a form which has a text area, which is where you put in your prompt. And inside here, we have a button that will trigger the handle submit functionality, which will actually like send the prompt like to the backend. Here we have a variable called loading. If it is actually true, then this text will actually appear on the screen, letting you know that it is loading. If it's not, then it will not show. And lastly, we have the response text, which will be displayed underneath everything else. Inside of here, we have three variables we're checking. We just have an input text. So that's the text that gets updated every single time we type into the input field. We have a response text. So this is what's going to hold whatever the response is from the backend call, and a loading variable that will be true or false depending on if we're waiting for a response. Inside here, we have a basic try catch functionality. What this is going to be doing is it's going to be using Axios to run our backend code, and it will send in the input text is whatever we're putting in. We have a couple of if statements, one checking if we're returning response or if we're returning tool call code, and it will like set the value depending on what it gets. We have some like basic error handling here, and finally when all of this try catch is done, the set loading will be set to false to let you know that like the backend call is no longer happening. So now to test it out, just run npm run start. This will take a couple of seconds. And just to check to make sure everything is good, we'll use one of the prompts we used like the last time at the beginning of the video. And we got a response. And that is the end of this video. I hope you found this information useful for your future apps using Toolhouse. If you're building an app, I'd love for you to post in the comment section what you're building, because I'm always interested in seeing what the community is creating. So overall, that concludes this video. I'm Jamie Dawson Codes, and thank you so much for watching.